What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be talking about the best way to draft your BR teams today to go flawless. Now, this is something that's a little bit controversial because a lot of it is kind of up to you and is based off the players that you like. However, there is a general formula you do want to look for, but this is just mostly what I believe would be the best ways to go flawless. As of right now, I got 3 flawlesses on the year, so I'm going to go through the steps that I take every single BR draft to help you guys go flawless and get guys like Mike Trout, Corey Seager, and Corey Kluber. So like any BR draft, you have 3 diamonds, 3 golds, 8 silvers, 10 bronzes, and 2 commons. Now, the biggest key to going flawless is drafting very good diamonds, not so much by attributes. Attributes, of course, do matter, but it's guys specifically that you play well with. So, example for me, if this was my first round, I would probably go Reggie Jackson here. Now, Pete Alonso, you can make the argument that he has better attributes. However, for me personally, I tend to do better with Reggie Jackson cards over a Pete Alonso card. So yes, even though Pete Alonso does have active quirks and he does have really good attributes, for me personally, the way I play the game, I personally play better with Reggie. So keep in mind, the best card on paper is not always the best card for your draft. Also, Reggie is a really good outfielder, so that might be something that you could kind of spice up your lineup with and maybe add a little bit more diversity. He could play left field or right field, so if you get a utility guy later in the draft, you could put him where he might be needed. So rounds 2, 3, and 4 are always gold, silver, and then bronze rounds. Now, these cards are the BR cards that have been released from previous programs. Normally, they've released new cards, but since we're in BR 10, they're just basically refreshing things. It's going to be a random pull for every single one of these guys. So that now that we're not really looking at diamonds, and this is kind of where you need to start getting picky, the way I personally recommend for pitching and hitting is, for hitting specifically, look at power over contact. Keep in mind, you're going to be playing on All-Star. You're going to be playing most likely against silver, bronze, and maybe gold pitching. The PCI is going to be rather large. It's not what I believe something to be that crazy about, oh, I need to focus on a guy with 120 contact. I'd rather take a guy with 120 power and 80 contact than a guy with 120 contact and 80 power. The ball does tend to fly a little bit more on All-Star as well, so that little bit of power on that card will actually help you in the long run as long as you square it up. Now, as for pitching, I recommend never getting a diamond pitcher. Like I said, it's All-Star. Even with the best pitcher in the game, the PCI size is still going to be kind of large, even for a guy that has maybe only 50 or 60 contact. Ultimately, don't want to do diamond pitching. With your diamonds, you really want to make sure that you get the best position players that you possibly can. But now looking at what I was saying about the position players, we have Ralph Kiner, 81 overall. This card is okay. He's really only that great against righties. His defense is pretty lackluster, and considering he's an outfielder, 40 speed is really low. Looking over at Johnny Damon, he's having a similar problem. Johnny Damon, his power against righties is actually not that bad. Same with his contact. But if anything, I could see this Johnny Damon being a bench bat because he is very weak against lefties. That 38 power, even if you square it up, the odds of it going anywhere are very, very, very low. My personal recommendation, if this was your exact draft, I would say go John Axford. Having a pitcher that's gold out of the bullpen, that's okay. I'm totally fine with that. But, you know, he also has a really good pitch mix. You know, this game, the meta pitch mix is cutter, sinker, slider. He's got a slider and a sinker with a decent fastball. His per nines are all right. So this would be a really good option, especially looking at the bullpen. Hits per 9 is probably going to be the biggest thing you're going to want to worry about, because that would shrink the PCI as much as it possibly can when you're facing a high diamond type of player. So same method with the silvers. Really just kind of pick what card is best for you. I personally like this Brian Shaw, so I'm just going to quickly pick him. And then same with the bronzes, same like with silvers and golds. Just pick the best card for you. Like this Christian Yelich card is really bad. And in a situation like this, when you have 3 really low power guys, it's not a bad idea to just automatically opt for a pitcher. So in this case, we have Bruce Sutter. He's a closer. I would just pick him and move on to the next round. So from here, you would keep going on and just basically figuring out what batters would be best for you, or if you want to opt to a bullpen. Like, for example, in this situation, you know, Colson Montgomery for me is probably going to be the best guy. I would never go with a gold starting pitcher. Every time you draft starting pitchers, you want to make sure that they are either bronzes or commons. Your commons should almost always be 2 starting pitchers. The reason for that is because starting pitchers take a long time to regenerate stamina. If they pitch and they actually deplete all of their stamina, they are going to take 4 games to regenerate. So let's say you do pick this J.R. Richard. Awesome. Yeah, he might throw well for, the one game that you use him, but you won't be able to use him again until game 4 or 5. Where if you take a gold reliever, let's say you burn out his energy, usually within 1 to 2 games, you're able to use him again at full stamina. So to reiterate, do not take silver or gold or any diamond pitchers that are starting pitchers. For your starters, you want to be sure that they're either bronzes or commons. And then for the relievers in your bullpen, that's when you can start looking at golds and silvers to kind of spruce up that bullpen. And there actually are a lot of really good silver and gold relievers. Another thing to keep in mind while you're going through your drafts is pay attention to your lefty pitchers. You want to have at least 2 to 3 left-handed guys in your bullpen, because if you're trying to play matchups, which is a really important thing in BR, you need to have those guys available. Especially if you have, let's say, you use 2 lefties in a game one day, and the next day you're facing a very lefty-heavy lineup. You really want to have that extra, 1 to 2 left-handed bullpen guys, so you're able to offset the lefties that you're facing. If you have an all-righty bullpen, I recommend just redrafting. Maybe if you're that good, you could just get through it, no problem. But a lot of times, especially later down where things start to get really intense, having an all-righty bullpen actually bites you rather than helps you. Another thing to consider when you're looking at these lineups is take a mental note of what positions you're taking and what positions you might need. So for example, I've only taken position players that are at shortstop, center, and right field. So at this point in round 8 of a draft, that is actually kind of low for position players because you do want to get as many good position players as you could possibly get. So this particular round really isn't the best. I would probably go Colton Wong here solely because he's a bench bat. 64 power is not that bad. And again, lefty, he's basically useless. But keep in mind of where you are at in your draft, and especially when it comes down to, let's say this last diamond is in round 25, be sure not to bite it to where it's only starting pitching or only relievers. Try to keep a spot open either in your lineup or in your bench. Now, one thing to note about the lineup, until you fill up your lineup entirely, they will only offer you cards that are available left in a slot. So, for example, I have a shortstop, center fielder, right fielder. I will not see another shortstop, center fielder, or right fielder until I completely fill out my lineup sheet. So that being said, starting from round 8 all the way through 26 until I start picking these other positions, I will only be offered catchers, first baseman, second baseman, third baseman, and left fielders. You have to be able to make sure that you're balancing your lineup as you go. Similarly to the bullpen, you want to make sure you're getting a decent mix between righties and lefties. In my opinion, the more switch hitters, the better, as long as they're actually decent cards. Because you do want to have that diversity in the lineup, just so it makes your opponent have a harder time with matchups. But usually, and just like in ranked seasons, anywhere from 2 to 3 lefties is more than enough. Maybe with a couple more as bench bats, and then especially if you're able to throw in a couple switch hitters in there, you'll be perfectly fine with the composition of your lineup. So one thing too that I do want to mention is that sometimes it is somewhat acceptable to throw out the strategy. So for like Ryan Mountcastle, Jock Peterson, let's say you don't like either of these 2 cards for whatever reason, you don't play well with them, or you just don't really feel like you need them in your lineup, it is okay then to draft like a Mike Soroka or Austin Adams. Like for example, Austin Adams, he throws a slider, a 4-seam, and a 2-seam. This card will most likely get absolutely lit up by anybody you would face. He's really got nothing special to him. It's 2 fastballs and a slider. I would not recommend drafting this. But when you go to someone like Mike Soroka, Soroka has a sinker, slider, and cutter. So that's that meta pitch mix. Now, I would recommend at this point just basically saying, well, this is the best of the 4 options. And that's probably one of these windows that you kind of have to use your head a little bit and then kind of toss the strategy out of the window just for a couple rounds, just to make sure like, hey, I am getting the best cards that I possibly can. So now that we're in the final round, I kind of just randomly pick cards just for the sense of this video, but this actually gave me a really good option here for the final diamond, because as you can see, you have a card like Jorge Soler, great power, somewhat good contact with bad defense. You have a card with high contact, low power, and decent defense. Same with Jimmy Rollins, similar situation. And then you have a guy like Joe Morgan, who's just a really good balanced card with decent speed. Now, for me, in this particular situation, you might think to yourself, oh, well, give me Joe Morgan. He seems to be the best balance of it all. good speed, decent defense, and good outfield. Well, in this team here, from what I see, I really don't need Jorge Soler, but in my mind, I would still actually pick him because I will say in this game, defense does not matter. If you put him in right field, which is his primary position, you say, okay, you get 56 fielding with 50 speed. That is going to be at least somewhat decent enough to at least be able to catch, routine fly balls. He's obviously not going to make any super crazy diving catches or, track the ball down for, 100 plus feet. But this is one of those cards where his hitting is so good, even though his defense is a bit lackluster, especially with the 50 speed in the outfield. This card has to be chosen because it is just that much of a powerhouse at the plate. But that goes for other positions as well. Don't really worry about like diamond defense or anything along those lines. As long as they're anywhere from like bronze to gold defense, they'll play just fine. As you know, I mean, you've probably seen people use George Brett, 99 George Brett, out of position at second base. I did that for the longest time and had no issues with him. So don't worry too much about poor defense on a good offensive card. That is completely okay, and I actually almost recommend that. So that's pretty much going to wrap up this video. I do want to re-emphasize that you do want to focus on power over contact with decent speed, especially if they're in the outfield. Defense does not matter as much as you might think it does, as long as they have a decent arm. Do not take diamond pitchers because most of the time they're probably not going to perform as well as you might think anyway. Be sure to draft both lefty bullpen, bench, and starting players just so you have a little bit more diversity into your lineup, and don't be afraid to redraft. At this point in the cycle, a lot of people have a lot of stubs. 1,500 subs to redraft. It's not that hard to come across that at this point in the game. So that is one of those things where if you aren't really satisfied with the draft, or you're like, I don't like this particular diamond, or you mess up and accidentally choose somebody, there's absolutely no shame in drafting the team that you know that you could go flawless with. But that's going to be it for today's video, y'all. I appreciate you, as always, for watching this video. We have a lot more MLB content on the way. Please be sure to leave a like and a comment if these tips helped you. Be sure to sub to the channel as well. I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next one.